Good morning, church. How are we doing this morning? So good. That was a little tepid, but that's all right. We'll get there. My name is Chris. I am the healing minister here at the Cross. I just want to welcome each and every one of you. I want to thank you for bringing the church into this room with you this morning. And I am really excited this morning to continue this series, 10 Bible stories you've never heard. You're like, but I heard these before. Maybe you've heard them. Maybe in a new light. You will hear them in a new light. This morning, we are going to be in the book of Numbers. And so if you want to get your Bible app or you want to get your Bible, we can just click right to the book of Numbers. We're going to be there cancel your lunch, okay? And then this is the 9 o'clock service. I'm saying that too, right? So it's going to be a bit because we have to do a little bit of historical context here before we can really get into our story today. And so that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to dive us in right now. A little historical context because this story is going to be exciting. And in the little teaser, we got a talking donkey later, okay? And this is not Shrek. So that's what we call in the business a teaser, okay? So in order to understand this, we need the historical context. The book of Numbers is the fourth book of the Bible. And what it does is it carries forward the story of Israel after the Exodus from slavery in Egypt. Now, God has brought his chosen people to Mount Sinai, and he entered into covenant with them there. And now, despite Israel's continued rebellion, God has graciously provided a way for Israel to live near his holy presence in the tabernacle. So the book of Numbers begins as Israel wraps up their 1-year stay at Mount Sinai, and they head into the wilderness on their way to the land that God had promised to Abraham. So Numbers follows this journey from Mount Sinai through the wilderness of Paran to the plains of Moab, which is right across from the promised land. And so this book opens with a bang. Like, you ever see like James Bond movie and it's just like there's this epic opening scene? This thing opens the same way with a census. That's not exciting, I know. But it is where it gets the name, the book of Numbers, because they've literally numbered the people. That is why it is called the book of Numbers. And so at the center are all the tribes. They're the 12 tribes of Israel, and they are surrounding the tabernacle, which is really this just beautiful and elaborate symbol of how God's holy presence was at the center of their existence as a people. Of course, though, if God's holy presence is going to be in their midst, then they need to make every effort to make the camp pure, a place that welcomes and both honors the holiness of God, which is where we get all of the purity laws from Leviticus. And so the cloud of God's presence then lifts from the tabernacle and guides Israel away from Mount Sinai into the wilderness. This must have been a sight to behold, right? This is it. We're going road tripping with Dad, right? Here we go. We are leaving and we are heading into the wilderness. But almost immediately, the Israelites start grumbling and complaining about their hunger and their thirst and how they want to go back to Egypt. Yes, remember Egypt? Where they were all in slavery. That Egypt. And I feel like God, along with Moses at this point, is like, we have not been on the road for 15 minutes, right? It is too early to go to a road stop. You should have gone to the bathroom before we left. Like, this is too early to be complaining on this road trip. I will turn this caravan around, right? So after this, you think it's bad enough, Moses' own brother and sister begin opposing him, bad-mouthing him, and they're doing it in front of all the people, which is not a good look. And so at this point, God essentially pulls the car over. He's like, we're going to have to dole out a little bit of punishment now, a little bit of reprimand, and you can dive in and read what that is, and it's kind of scary. So, but just the deal, we usually think like, man, God, that's a really severe punishment. But God's just going, hey, I give you provision, I tell you what not to do, then you do it, and then you get upset when I follow through with the consequence. God isn't just throwing out consequences for no reason. We got to remember that as we go through this story. The next section begins as the Israelites arrived in the desert of Paran. So they're about halfway to the promised land. And God tells Moses to send out 12 spies, one from each tribe, so they can scout out the promised land. So they all go out. 10 of them come back, and there's no way. We're going to get killed by the Canaanites. We can't do it. There's no way we can do it. And then there's two spies, and it's Caleb and Joshua, who are like, no, we can do it. God's got us. We got faith. It's going to be good. It's going to be fantastic. But this just whips everybody up into this rage and a frenzy, and they start planning a mutiny. So terrible road trip so far, right? The people now want to appoint a new leader, and they want to head back to Egypt. They literally want to turn the car around. So God is understandably angry at this point, but Moses intercedes on the people's behalf, despite the fact that they're trying to replace him. Just some beautiful leadership. He calls God to be faithful to his promises to Abraham. And so God does, but not without the expense of his justice. So God gives the Israelites what they want. You want to go back to Egypt? You don't want to enter the promised land? Well, then you won't. And so they are sentenced as a generation to wander through the wilderness for 40 years until they die, which is brutal. But there's still some grace in this too, because only their children are allowed to enter into the promised land. Again, this seems really harsh on its face, but all God did was give them what they wanted. You know, sometimes we want to try to manufacture God's promises. We want to do this in our own ability. He knows. He's like, you don't want me to give you what you think you actually want. I have something so much better for you. If you could just have some faith that I know what's best for you. I know what's better for you than you. Now, you'd think this would be a severe enough consequence, right? This would wake them up. This would be the cold splash of water in their face, but it gets worse. So now they leave the region of Paran, and they hit the road, and guess what? Shocking, they put on that same record. They put it on, they're like, grumbling, complaining, we got no water or some food. I mean, they're just constantly singing the same song, and it's terrible. Stop complaining. Now, I give them a lot of gruff, but I'm the Israelites. I do the exact same thing, complain and moan. And they even start asking Moses, like, why did you even bring us out of Egypt in the first place? And yet God still provides for their thirst. Despite all their complaining, he then tells Moses to speak to a rock and that water will come out of the rock. Like, this will be an incredible miracle for them to see. But now Moses, who I got to think is that he's a bit testy at this point as well, oversteps his bounds, and instead of doing what God asked him to do, he actually hits the rock twice with his staff, probably out of frustration. He then says something like, you rebels, do I have to bring water out of this rock? Now again, Moses, obviously a little bit frustrated, but he essentially dishonors God in this moment by putting himself in God's place as the one who brings out the water. And so for this, both Aaron and Moses suffer consequences. Aaron dies, and Moses brings down upon himself the same fate as the wilderness generation. He will never set foot into the promised land. Now, fun fact here, those two spies I mentioned earlier, Caleb and Joshua, they're the only two from that generation who actually got to set foot into the promised land. And I know we're only week 3 into this series, but every week we've been wrestling with this tension between works and faith, works and faith. What got them into the promised land was their faith. Their faith that God could stick with them and would be with them. So this is an absolutely brutal road trip so far. And you're like, nothing could make this worse. Like, it is as worse. And then you go, yeah, no, it could. What? Poisonous snakes. Poisonous snakes. That makes everything worse. I don't know when poisonous snakes makes anything better. And since the Israelites, they rebel again, God sends this very strange judgment on them. Venomous snakes that come and bite them. This is brutal. Moses again intercedes on behalf of the people and goes to God, and God tells Moses to do a very strange thing. He says, make a bronze snake, lift it up on a pole, and whoever looks at the snake will be healed from the poisonous snake bite. That is a very, very strange symbol. But it speaks again to the challenge that God has of being faithful to his covenant. But he is also right to bring justice to the Israelites' evil and to their disobedience. But even God's justice, it gets transformed into a source of life for those who will look to God for healing. We still use this snake on a staff to represent healing to this day. Asclepius was the first physician hero. We've got a cool picture of him. He was later recognized as a god, lowercase g, of healing, and a cult spread in the 5th century. And there's all these sanctuaries around Greece that would be around healing and purification, mostly involving snakes. And so there's this piece that just kind of exists in history when we see a snake wrapped around a pole. And you're like, well, that's old news. We don't have anything like that today. And I go, okay, check your insurance card. Blue Cross Blue Shield. There we go. Well, there it is, a Blue Cross. What's on that blue shield, y'all? So it exists. This all comes out of this story. After the snake adventure, the Israelites head into the plains of Moab. And the king of Moab, his name is Balak, and he is freaking out at this point around this huge group of people that are traveling through his territory. And so he does, as you do, hires a pagan sorcerer. That's what you do whenever you're scared and there's a lot of people coming. And his name is Balaam, to pronounce curses upon Israel. And now we can start. So none of that even comes out of my time. Isn't that great? So there's our history to get us to start. All right, so where do we start then? What does it mean to curse? And I don't mean to cuss or to swear. What is a curse? It is to pronounce judgment, destruction, damnation. It is a word that is in the vocabulary of humanity outside of both Christianity and Scripture. In fact, many primitive cultures used to believe that there were supernatural powers, that these superpower beings could invoke curses on people. And maybe that would be crop failure. Maybe it would be financial failure. In some cases, it would even be death. And so Balaam was a soothsayer, a diviner of sorts. Balaam had a great reputation for one thing. He had mastered the art of cursing. He had mastered the art of cursing people. Now, he lived near the upper Euphrates, where he had a heritage from Babylonia, which is long famed in the art of divination and demonic religion. And so no doubt, Balaam was able to invoke certain demonic things. He could do this. He could curse people. And that's where we begin in Numbers 22, beginning in verse 1. So now you've got the history. Here we go. Verse 1. Then the Israelites traveled to the plains of Moab and camped along the Jordan across from Jericho. Now Balak, son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites, and Moab was terrified because there were so many people. Indeed, Moab was filled with dread because of the Israelites. The Moabites said to the elders of Midian, "This horde is going to lick up everything around us, as an ox licks up the grass of the field." So initially here, it looks like their fears are more economic. Right? They're not mentioning war. They just called attention to how many Israelites are approaching. And if they don't mention war, although Israel has been defeating people along the way. They just destroyed the Canaanites in Arad in chapter 21, which is what Caleb and Joshua said was going to happen. But Balak speaks of the Israelites coming near to them, settling near to them, and taking away their resources, which gives him a ton of fear. And so when the land across the Jordan now looks like it is in trouble of being invaded by these people, well, Balak, king of Moab, calls on this quasi-prophet, and he asks him to pronounce an effective curse against Israel. Again, remember, Balaam was the king of curses in his time. Here it is, verse 4. So Balak, son of Zippor, who was king of Moab at the time, sent messengers to summon Balaam, son of Beor, who was at Pethor, near the Euphrates River, in his native land. Balak said, "A people have come out of Egypt. They cover the face of the land and have settled next to me. Now, come and put a curse on these people, because they are too powerful for me. Perhaps then I will be able to do I will be able to defeat them and drive them out of the land. For I know that whoever you bless is blessed, and whoever you curse is cursed." He had a pretty good reputation. The elders of Moab and Midian left, taking with them the fee for divination. They had came to Balaam, and they told him what Balak had said. Okay, there's a lot here, but what you need to know is that Balaam is a hired hand. They're bringing a fee of divination, right? They're going to pay him to actually do this. Now, I was just at Publix the other day, and I only buy sparkling water when it's BOGO. I buy one, get one, right? Historical fun fact, he had the very first ever BOGO. Bless one, curse one. It's true. It's just facts. It's just real. It's just Those are real things. Balak was hoping that these curses would bail him out of this situation. I know, so good. It's so good. And these dad jokes right now are a blessing, although some of you are feeling them as a curse. And I understand that is complicated. That is complicated. All right, one last historical side note here about Balaam. We can find proof for Balaam, son of Beor's existence outside of the Bible. There was an excavation in 1967, the Deir Allah excavation, and they found this piece of plaster, and then we got a picture of it here. I spent all week trying to translate it. No. There's 119 pieces of plaster, and you can still see them today in the Jordan Museum in Amman. And the first translation came out in 1973, an English translation in 1976. I'm just going to read part of the translation. This is so neat. It says, "The sayings of Balaam, son of Beor, the man who was a seer of the gods. Lo, gods came to him in the night and spoke to him according to these words." So this inscription provides rare, extra-biblical evidence about a Bible character. And yet the Bible has a lot more to say about him too. 2 Peter 2:15, "They have left the straight way and wandered off to follow the way of Balaam, who loved the wages of wickedness." We see him mentioned again in Jude 1:11, "Woe to them! They have taken the way of Cain. They have rushed for profit into Balaam's error." It's pretty incredible. And you keep seeing this tension here of he wants money. It's for wickedness. So the Bible doesn't have a lot of good things to say about my boy Balaam here. He is mentioned again in the book of Revelation, but that's for what he gets up to in Numbers 25, which we're not going to get there today, but you can go and look. But when Jesus speaks to the church in Pergamum, we see this in Revelation 2:14. "Nevertheless, I have few things against you. There are some among you who hold to the teachings of Balaam, who taught Balak to entice the Israelites to sin, so that they ate food sacrificed to idols and committed sexual immorality." He's actually mentioned in the Bible quite a lot, but he is not a traditional holy man. I see Balaam a little bit more like one of those guess your weight guys at the carnival. You know what I mean? Now, I mean, he's pretty good at it. I mean, he's really good at it, actually. Or like one of those shopping center psychics, right? You ever seen that deal? I remember when I was in my 20s, I remember some of it. And so I remember I was in a band, and we weren't good at all, but we were in an RV, as you do, and we were driving across from California, as you do, and then we were in, I think it was like New Mexico, that's pretty far, actually, from California. You're in the middle of the desert, just road and road. And I remember seeing like this big shopping center, and it was like psychic, tarot cards, whole deal, like come in, and it was like magnificent. And then there was a sign, and right across it, and it said, "Closed permanently." They didn't see that coming. It just feels like, anyway, I digress, but I just feel like you had one job. See the end of your business. Okay, we pick it back up in verse 8. "Spend the night here," Balaam said to them, "and I will report back to you with the answer the Lord gives me." So the Moabite officials stayed with him. God came to Balaam, this is interesting, and asked, "Who are these men with you?" Balaam said to God, "Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab, sent me this message. A people has come out of Egypt, covers the face of the land. Now come and put a curse on them for me. Perhaps then I will be able to fight them and drive them away." But God said to Balaam, "Do not go with them." I want you to remember that. He says initially, do not go with them. "You must not put a curse on these people, because they are blessed." Now, I'll stop there for a second, because this is actually a bit of grace here from God to him. He's like, listen, they're already blessed. You try to curse them, it's just going to come right back on you. You're going to be cursed. Don't go. Do not put a curse on them. The next morning, Balaam got up and said to Balak's officials, "Go back to your own country, for the Lord has refused to let me go with you." So the Moabite officials returned to Balak and said, "Balaam refused to come with us." Now, Balak's not happy about this. He's got a lot of money. He's like, I can buy this guy. Then Balak sent other officials, more numerous, more distinguished than the first. They came to Balaam and said, "This is what Balak, son of Zippor, says. Do not let anything keep you from coming to me, because I will reward you handsomely and do whatever you say. Come and put a curse on these people." But Balaam answered them, "Even if Balak gave me all the silver and gold in his palace, I could not do anything great or small to go beyond the command of the Lord my God. I'm going to stop there because it almost looks like he's like, the Lord his God. He don't believe that. He's just fattening the pot, folks. He's like, if you gave me all the silver and all the gold, I still would not be able to come. Now, spend the night here so I can find out what else the Lord wants to tell me. I love that. That night, God came to Balaam and said, since these men have come to summon you, go with them, but do only what I tell you. So God is speaking to Balaam. And again, at first glance, it can look like Balaam is kind of being reverent to God, saying that, like, look, if you gave me all the gold, you gave me all the silver, that's not what's happening. He is just trying to fatten the pot. Like, go get it. He's a good capitalist. He's just like, supply and demand, right? I'm the guy you need. You're going to pay me. How much money can I get out of this deal? We keep reading, verse 21. Balaam got up in the morning, saddled his donkey, and went with the Moabite officials. But God was very angry when he went. And the angel of the Lord stood in the road to oppose him. Balaam was riding on his donkey, and his 2 servants were with him. Initially, this can be a bit of a confusing passage, right? Because God initially said, don't go. And then he said, hey, go, but do only what I tell you. So then when he says, hey, go, and then the next thing we see, it says God is angry. The ultimate question here is, did God change his mind? Why would God be angry with Balaam for going with men he just told him to go with? And this is a major point. And honestly, this is where many of us get stuck with God. God does not approve of everything he allows. God does not approve of everything that he allows. God was angry because Balaam went with the princes of Moab. Let there be no doubt that God is not pleased when men do evil that he permits. God sometimes allows men to sin, even though he has condemned and forbidden it. This is a good example of what we may call God's permissive will. Hang in here. This is a good theological point here. God forbade Balaam to go with the delegation that had come. And he also forbade Balaam from cursing Israel, the people that he had blessed. God's direct revelation to Balaam, forbidding him to go, was his will in precept. When he permitted Balaam to accompany these men with Balak, it was his permissive will. God allows men to do those things which he has forbidden, but woe to those who persist on the path of sin, for it is surely the road of destruction. Just because God allows men to sin does not mean that he approves of sin. So we keep reading, and as promised, we've arrived at the talking donkey. We've got here. I knew it. We'd get here, and this is not Shrek. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with a sword drawn in his hand, it turned off the road into a field. Balaam beat it to get it back into the road. Come on, donkey. Then, he wasn't Scottish. Okay, then the angel of the Lord stood in a narrow path through the vineyard, the walls on both sides. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, it pressed close to the wall, crushing Balaam's foot against it. So he beat the donkey again. This guy's got a problem. Then the angel of the Lord moved on ahead and stood in a narrow place where there was no room to turn, either to the right or to the left. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, it lay down under Balaam, and he was angry, and he beat it with his staff. This poor donkey. Now, God is certainly putting Balaam in his place here. We have to really understand what's going on in this experience here for Balaam, right? Think of this. Balaam does not see the angel of God, but the donkey does, right? His literal job title is a seer. He's a seer, and he can't see the angel of the Lord. The whole point of him being a prophet is that he can see God, and he can talk to God, and he can see things. The donkey is a better seer, is a better prophet than Balaam. He is just a little sidebar, side B, plan B, nothing prophet. He's nothing. He's nothing. He can't see it. We can't miss that. Numbers 22, 28 through 31. Then the Lord opened the donkey's mouth. Oh, I love this. Now he's going to talk. And I know, I'm going to pause right here. If you made first time in church and you're like, talking donkey? First time I'm back in church. This is what we're doing, talking donkey? Look, there's a serpent talking in the very beginning. I mean, virgin birth. There's a lot of things, man. You're going to have some faith and dive in. But here's the bigger picture. It's God's creation. He can do whatever he wants with his creation. We don't understand God's holiness. We don't fathom how huge, how magnificent. He can do whatever he wants to do because he's God and we're not. So the Lord opened the donkey's mouth, and it said to Balaam, "What have I done to you to beat me these 3 times?" This poor donkey, right? Just out the gate is like, "What are you doing to me, man? Why are you beating me to death? I can't believe this." And what I love here is that Balaam doesn't even hesitate. He's not like, "Whoa, you can talk? I should have beat you years ago," right? I mean, you'd think. Balaam answered the donkey, "You have made a fool of me. If only I had a sword in my hand, I would kill you right now." Oh, the irony here. The angel of the Lord has his sword drawn. Could kill him right now. And he's like, "If I had a sword, I would kill you, donkey." Then the donkey said to Balaam, and I love this donkey. Listen to this. "Am I not your own donkey, which you have always ridden to this day? Have I been in the habit of doing this to you? I am your faithful steed. I am a great donkey. I have never been a problem. I have never done this to you. And then the first time I'm trying to evade an angel that I can see that you can't, you just beat me with a club. You're an evil man. You're an evil, evil man." But I love this. This is the first time Balaam gets honest. He asks him this question, and Balaam goes, "No." No, you've been great. Actually, you are a fantastic donkey. I really feel terrible now that I've beaten you like I have, and I'm really thinking a lot about my life and my choices. And that's where Balaam is right now. And as soon as he gets there, verse 31 says, "Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with his sword drawn. So he bowed low and fell face down." Oh, I love it. He has an encounter with real God now, and he's just on the ground. That's what would happen, by the way, with all of us. Angel of the Lord shows up right now, we all just pass out, like we'd be done. We don't understand it. Go and look and read. Every time an angel shows up, what do they first say? "Fear not," because you would be terrified. At the beginning of all knowledge begins with the fear of the Lord, understanding the reverence, the magnificence of glory. We don't understand it. We really don't. And so whenever an angel shows up, they're like, "Fear not." And I feel like the person's already passed out. They're like, "I did it again. I just made this guy pass out again." Every time I show up, this guy just passes out. Terrified. He didn't even get to hear. I said, "Fear," and he was already out. So what I love about this, then the donkey speaks to Balaam, rebuking him for his sin, right? He's like, "I've been a good donkey. Why are you beating me?" And I've been using NIV all day, which I know some of you believe is maybe the not inspired version, which is not true, but then I'll give it to you. I'll give you the King James. You asked for it, you got it. 2 Peter 2:16, King James Version. "But he was rebuked for his iniquity. The dumbass speaking with a man's voice forbade the madness of the prophet." You're welcome. Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, you can send the email right before you even leave the service if you want. That's fine. I love that Balaam is like the master of curses. I just cursed right now on the platform, but I didn't because I just read the Bible. Who's the master of curses now, y'all? What's up, Balaam? Come at me. Give me a break. Pastor Mark, we were all talking before in the huddle. He's like, "I feel like every other church purposely goes to NIV at that point because of that, and we went the other way." That's all right. We're just trying to make sure you understand. The donkey is a better prophet or seer than Balaam. The donkey. Let no prophet ever attempt to take credit for what he sees or what he says, for God can do much more with a donkey. With a donkey. So now Balaam has this real encounter with God. When he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with his sword drawn, he bowed low. He fell face down, understanding the reverence. And now the angel of the Lord is going to speak. Verse 32, the angel of the Lord asked him, "Why have you beaten your donkey these 3 times? I have come here to oppose you because your path is a reckless one before me. The donkey saw me and turned away from me these 3 times. If it had not turned away, I would certainly have killed you by now, but I would have spared it." I love this. Even the angel of the Lord's like, that's a good donkey, right? Lord made that donkey, and he was like, it is good. Like, that is a good donkey. Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, I have sinned. As a realization about what's actually going on now. I did not realize you were standing in the road to oppose me. Now, if you are displeased, I will go back. The angel of the Lord said to Balaam, go with the men, but speak only what I tell you. So Balaam went with Balak's officials. And when Balak heard that Balaam was coming, he went out to meet him at the Moabite town on the Arnon border at the edge of the territory. Think of this. Balak is so desperate for this sorcerer. He runs out like he's the prodigal, like the dad running for the prodigal to go where have you been? I need you here. He runs to the edge of his own territory. Balak said to Balaam, did I not send you an urgent summons? Why didn't you come to me? Am I really not able to reward you? I will pay you, man. Verse 38, well, I have come to you now, Balaam replied, but I can't say whatever I please. I must speak only what God puts in my mouth. This story type fits into a category of faith challenges similar to what we heard last week with Jacob wrestling with God. What changed with Jacob in that story is he had a face-to-face encounter with a pre-incarnate Jesus. And that's exactly what's happening here with Balaam. He has a face-to-face encounter with God, and it changes him. Who is the angel of the Lord? Well, the precise identity of the angel of the Lord is not given in the Bible. However, there are many important clues to his identity. There are Old and New Testament references to angels of the Lord, an angel of the Lord, and the angel of the Lord. And it seems that whenever the definite article the is being used, it is speaking about a very unique being, capital B, separate from other angels. The angel of the Lord speaks as God, identifies himself with God, and exercises the responsibilities of God. So who is the angel of the Lord? This is pre-incarnate Jesus. The appearance of the angel of the Lord, by the way, is mentioned a lot in the New Testament, but ceases after the birth of Jesus. You never see it again in the New Testament after Jesus is incarnate, after he is born. It's incredible. God had promised to bless Israel and also to make Israel a source of blessing to all who treated his people with favor. Balaam was seeking to turn God's blessing into a curse, and by doing so, cursing himself. So in this part here, he can only speak blessings. So Balak's paid him. He goes up, and 4 times he goes to curse him, and all that can come out is a blessing. It just reminds me of the movie Liar, Liar with Jim Carrey. His son makes the wish, and he's like, blessings, blessings for Israel. Oh, I'm trying to curse him. Blessings, blessings. All he can do is bless them. It's all he can do. God is in every part of it. So not only, though, can Balaam not curse Israel, but this is beautiful. God actually gives him a vision about a future Israelite king who will one day bring God's justice to all of the nations. It's in the 4th oracle, his 4th blessing. Numbers 24, 15 through 19. Then he spoke his message, the prophecy of Balaam, son of Beor, the prophecy of one whose eyes sees clearly, the prophecy of one who hears the words of God, who has knowledge from the Most High, who has seen a vision of the Almighty, who falls prostrate, and whose eyes are opened. That's quite an introduction Balaam is giving to himself. He's saying, I have seen the one true God. So everything that's coming out of my mouth now is truth. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star will come out of Jacob. A scepter will rise out of Israel. He will crush the foreheads of Moab, the skulls of all the people of Sheph. Edom will be conquered. Seir, his enemy, will be conquered. But Israel will grow strong. A ruler will come out of Jacob and destroy the survivors of the city. These rebellion stories of the wilderness, they seem to just get worse and worse. And while God does bring partial acts of judgment upon Israel, God also continues to show them mercy and give them provision and food and water all along the way. And this story here of Balaam truly shows God's grace, Because imagine this, think of this. Israel is down on the camp. They're grumbling, they're complaining, they're still unhappy. They still don't think that God is good and that he knows what he's doing here. They're grumbling and complaining. And yet, meanwhile, up in the hills, unbeknownst to them, he is blessing them with an appearance from pre-incarnate Jesus. And they have no idea. We have no idea in our own stories how much provision he has given us. I think one day in glory, we're going to look back and go, oh my gosh, all of that? You did all of that. I had no idea. And I remember I was complaining the whole time during that. And you were blessing me, and I could never see it. It is this contrast between Israel's rebellion, which is really our rebellion, and God's faithfulness in the wilderness that has made these wilderness stories so important for generation after generation. These stories always serve as a warning that while God will remain faithful to his covenant and to all of his promises, he will also allow his people to walk away in rebellion and face those consequences. Let us stand in this place, church. I want us to really hear this truth this morning and to really hear the good news this morning from this story. Here is the truth. We don't need Balaam or anyone else to curse us. We're already cursed. We are already cursed because of sin. We've all broken God's law, every single one of us. Our only hope is that someone would redeem us from this curse. 2 Corinthians 5:21, God made him who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. Here's the good news this morning. Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. Deuteronomy 21:23, you must not leave the body hanging on the pole overnight. Be sure to bury it the same day, because anyone who is hung on a pole is under God's curse. You must not desecrate the land the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. And it is exactly that scripture that Paul is quoting in Galatians 3:12 through 14 when he says this: the law is not based on faith. On the contrary, it says, the person who does these things will live by them. You want to live by the law, that will be your blessing. You will live by the law. But Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone who is hung on a pole. He redeemed us in order that the blessing given to Abraham might come to the Gentiles through Christ Jesus, so that by faith we might receive the promise of the Spirit. All of the fury that God unleashed, every curse for every sin, for every sinner who would ever believe, fully fell on Christ on the cross. Everything. So when you hear Jesus say, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why have you forsaken me? Because we're cursed. That's why. The Father cursed his Son with the full curse that belonged to all the people throughout all of human history who would ever believe. He was forsaken. He was cursed for us. And he took on the curse for us so that we could receive the blessing of all blessings. And that grace is available to you right now, this morning. Maybe you've never been in church. Maybe somebody invited you. Maybe you're like, so my first time I come to church, talking donkey, and I think the dude swore. Like, that's a weird Sunday to be here. But the grace that is afforded to us, that broke the curse, that is available to you. To you. All throughout Scripture, we see Jesus say, follow me. Follow me. And we're not following just out of obedience like that. This is the work. I'm just going to follow him. It's our faith. It's our faith, believing that he is who he says that he is. And that has major ramifications for your life. Is he who he said that he is? And we fully believe that he is. He is the Son. He's the Alpha. He is the Omega. He is the King of Kings. He is the Lord of Lords. He is the only one who could take up that curse. He's the only one. and he did it, and he did it for you, and he did it for me. And so our prayer this morning is this. If you don't know him, you don't have a relationship with him, our prayer is that you would wrestle with that question, are you who you say that you are? And we fully believe the answer to that question is yes. You are the only way